My name's Chris Molinar, and in this video today, we are talking about emotional intelligence. And this is a topic that a lot of people do not talk about, but it is one of the most important when it comes to effectiveness and making sales and being productive. If we are to break down this concept very quickly, simply, and easily, Tony Robbins once said that if there was one thing that I could tell people that would change their life forever, it would be to take control of their emotions. So stick around right to the end of this video because I'm going to give you practical examples of how this works in your business as a salesperson or business person, but also some resources that I've specifically used in order to improve my ability to become a successful business person and salesperson. So think about this for a second. If you're not familiar with how the brain functions, there's what some people call the three different methods of thinking, so to speak. So we've got what's called the lizard brain, and that is our primitive functions. It's our emotional quick response. And then we also have what's called our mammal brain, which is more or less our brain chemistry and how we interpret and react to things automatically, somewhat speaking. And then we also have the cognitive functions of the brain, or the thinking brain, as you might think of it. Your ability to reason, your ability to plan, and sort of abstract thinking. Now, if you don't apply all of these different functions and you revert solely to the primitive reactions and emotional responses of life, it doesn't always turn out perfectly well. Let's just say it that much. And you don't have to look very far to see divorce, crime, or any of the other things that go against the 10 Commandments. Now, we're not going down the religious rabbit hole today, but I do want to put this in a perspective that you can use for your business. Number one is being self-aware. If you don't really understand yourself, then how could you sell yourself? One of the most important things that salespeople need to know how to do is to find out what your unique value proposition is. Every single sales trainer talks about this. And if you've identified your strengths and weaknesses, and if you've identified where you currently stand, that also gives you an advantage. Because how are you supposed to improve where you are if you don't know where you are? And when you're looking at what you have access to in building your unique value proposition, knowing what you have on day one, or as of today, as resources, you will quickly know what you have as a personal advantage compared to somebody else. Now, you might think, I'm no better than the next guy, but every single person in the world is individual. Now, yes, there are tendencies that might make you similar to somebody else, but you are also different than every other single person in the world. And if we take a look at that concept for a minute, I know Bob Proctor talks about the paradigm shift, but we all reach moments in our life, whether negative or positive, where you have a paradigm shift. Now, if there's an emotional impact in your life that totally changes things forever, perhaps that's one way to go about it. Or you're extremely intentional about changing your life. Maybe you're totally sick of the way things are and you want to change things. If you're a newer agent, do you think of yourself as an agent? And if you're an experienced agent, do you remember what that was like? If you're an experienced agent, how many houses do you sell per year? And if you have an immediate response to that, are you improving? How many years in a row have you sold the same number of houses? Is your plan to grow? Everybody wants to grow. A really great resource on this thought is Zero Resistance Selling by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, and he talks about the self-image in relation to our paradigms, and in that particular book, how to cut through sales situations like butter so that you don't create resistance in your own mind. Once you expand your mind, once you expand your thinking through your ability to become self-aware, you will be surprised how often your results are based on your ability to think, or perhaps your limiting beliefs. Next on the list is your ability to regulate your emotions, similar to what we were talking about there with Tony Robbins. So being calm in high pressure situations. especially as a business person or real estate agent, how many times do you come in contact with somebody who might be in conflict? Hopefully you are not partaking in that conflict. Hopefully you are making it better. I feel like as a real estate agent, there are countless times where I become the liaison in helping manage emotions to create a smooth transaction from A to Z. And my experience just happens to facilitate that, but it's your ability to make sure that people don't fight during negotiation, whether that's the other agent or whether you have a couple clients that you're dealing with that might disagree on something. And as Mike Ferry says, in real estate, we are the calming force in a transaction. They hire us because we remove the emotion, make it very logical, and provide a system for them. And you yourself might also have situations where you have your own inner turmoil, and it's your ability to communicate that and or interpret that in a way that will fuel your business on a move forward basis. For example, you were competing for a listing and you didn't get that listing. Or maybe you lost a client after months and months and months of working with them. We've all had that happen where a listing expires after a year of working hard, they didn't take your advice and we were chasing the market all the way until it finally expired, and then they listed with another agent, and one day on the market that agent sells the property, they get paid, you get nothing, you lose all of that time, and they look like the hero and you look like the villain. But guess what? Keep an open mind, because one of the next scenarios, you will be that second agent. And I joke sometimes and say, I adopted this joke, the only thing better than being the second wife is being the third real estate agent. The Magic of Believing is a really great book that digs into your ability to see what's next for yourself, to get rid of those limiting beliefs, to expand your mind and your business, and through experience, create new systems so that you can help manage clients' expectations for a smooth transition and a smooth transaction moving forward. Next on the list is having a clear goal and a plan and stay motivated even when things get difficult. So we mentioned in passing the magic of believing, but visualizing is a separate concept. Now, if you have other business partners or other people in your life that are the visionary, it's important to have. So if you're the thinking person, I'm a thinker, I am the visionary in my business. But I also need people that are the doers, right? Because if you have 100 ideas, it doesn't really matter until you implement one of them, or you try multiple different ones till you find one that works. It's the idea of building 12 bridges that are half done and none of them help you get to the other side. Or the idea of building 100 oil wells and none of them are deep enough to get to the oil. So sometimes it's great to be a visionary, but you also need a partner that's a doer that helps you follow through for the win. And sometimes simplicity is the biggest and best answer to all of it. And as I mentioned, not every idea will work out for you, but if you are persistent, your ability to follow through. And once you have your goal established, it's important to look at what's required for that goal to take place. So the doer would look at, what do you need to do today? We only have right now, okay? So what are the action steps? My prospecting plan for today, and developing the courage to follow through on prospecting and staying persistent even when especially you don't see results today. That's why the blend of having somebody who's the doer and somebody who can see the distance is important. And if you are one or the other, make sure that you find somebody in your life that can support that other perspective. A great resource on this one is Lead the Field by Earl Nightingale. And yes, there is a book, but the recording, which is free on Spotify, is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best audio programs of all time. So dig into that and he will teach you all about persistence and all about many different perspectives that take place back in the 80s or 90s when he originally recorded that are still extremely valuable and important today. And Earl Nightingale is one of the pioneers of the personal development industry today. He was the influencer before there were influencers, so to speak. He's one of the originals. Next on the list is your ability to understand your client's needs. Now, it sounds simple, But when I first started, I needed to take a look at this book, which is called What Everybody is Saying. And when you're dealing with objections, as an example, from a potential prospect, they might not say anything, but if you can understand from their gestures what they are saying without saying it, you can stop and address that head on. So people say, what do I say when somebody says this? And my answer to that is, it's less important that you have a response to every objection, and it's more important that you control the environment through your sales posture, and that you also understand that they are following along with what you are doing. You need to be the leader in the conversation. You need to take control as the professional, but you also need to understand their perspective. So do not, as an example, continue with the sales conversation or presentation if you notice that there's a disconnect or that there's some resistance from their side of the table, based on their body language. And that particular book is exceptional on digging into those details and helping you learn all of those details. As an example, you might be nervous in the beginning, and still to this day, you might get a little bit nervous when you're talking about the final closing question, which is really simple. Are you guys in a position to get the ball rolling today, or where are you at with things? That's my favorite question. It's very simple and laid back. But when they say, well, what's the commission? That's not necessarily an objection. That might just be them asking, what are my net proceeds after the sale? Which is why I start digging into, okay, great. What price do you want me to base this on? Okay, let's write that down. Okay, great. And we're looking at a commission rate of X, Y, Z. Okay, great. We've got GST and PST, or sales tax, on the commission. Okay, great. Let's write that down. Do you have a mortgage balance on the property, if you don't mind me asking? Okay, great. Let's write that down. Are you porting the mortgage, or are you taking the mortgage with you for the purchase, or do you have a payout penalty? And if you have a payout penalty, what might that penalty be approximately? Okay, great. Let's put a pretty rough estimate, a relatively accurate estimate for that. And then you have a little bit of lawyer fees or title transfer fees. Here's what your net proceeds after the sale look like. Does that make sense to you? Okay, great. So if you guys are ready to get the ball rolling, what this essentially looks like is it's a 2-page contract, and then a lot of the rest of the documents are more or less formalities with how our process works in terms of being a real estate agent and protecting your best interests. And then of course with the listing, we've got the data input sheet that we need to collect information from your property and fill that in as well. But the 3 most important parts of the contract are price, which we talked about, commission rate, which we talked about, and then the length of the contract, which is typically X, Y, Z, based on my policies, or based on general practice, or based on our approach and what would you prefer. And if that's all good to go, it's just initials here and signature there. Now, that would be similar to the doctor who takes control of the environment during conversations with your health that might sometimes be a little bit edgy. And because they say ah with their little toothpick, or their little popsicle stick rather, and they look down your throat, and then they look in your ear, which is awkward. But because they have the suit on, they have the white suit, and because of their demeanor, their professional approach, and because they're in control of the interaction, it smooths everything out, which is a basis of emotional intelligence and being the authority. Now I have 2 really great resources on this particular thought. One of them is Versatile Selling by Wilson Learning Library, Larry Wilson. And it talks about the personality styles, you understanding your personality and you understanding other people's personality, so you can be more adaptable. You can be that chameleon that really speaks to everybody's interests and perspectives. And then one of my favorites, Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. He teaches a lot of really, really great principles. That is a famous all-time classic. And he talks about things like speaking in terms of their wants, in terms of remembering their name, in terms of admitting when you're wrong and being upfront about it. And on the list goes, dig into those resources by all means. Next on the list is the importance of social skills in networking. Now you can practice scripts, which I think is important, but it's also important to practice improv. And like I talked about before, sales posture, your ability to present with confidence is important. You should have seen the very first videos that I recorded back in the day. I was very nervous. I was very awkward. You should have seen me when I first went to the Dale Carnegie public speaking training. Not only was I trembling when I was on my feet speaking in front of 30 business professionals that I did not know, when I didn't own any professional attire at the time during the beginning of my career. Huge learning curve, obviously. But once I was finished that talk, I was nervous for the entire week, knowing that I had to come back and do it next week. But that was one of the most pivotal moments, paradigm shifts for me, to go from an introverted, shy, nervous, awkward person to somebody who became a great communicator, consider myself a great communicator, in order to follow through and become a good salesperson and a successful business person over time. So scripts help you as a blueprint of guiding the conversation in the right direction, but it's your ability to not have to think about what question you need to ask next, and in order to weave through the script, improv conversations with what their specific goals are, focusing on what they want to do next. And when you're networking with other people, one of the most important things in building a solid foundation in your business is your sphere of influence, building a repeat referral business. And you can't do that unless you have the ability to add depth to the relationships. And something as simple as following up on a regular basis with the people that you know and writing notes in your CRM system for the conversations that you had with the people that you know. Because once you get beyond 100 relationships, it's very hard to remember every intricate fact about each person that you have relationships with. But if you take small notes, next time you follow up with that person and refer back to what it was that you talked about the first time, they are going to be, first of all, they're going to feel important, but they're also going to be impressed that you remembered all of those things. And a hot tip, if you don't have really great notes, is to simply look them up on social media and cross-reference what it is that they're up to in their life, and just make sure that you're aware of it and build depth in your relationships with a reference point by way of social media. And if you understand the law of reciprocity, what this essentially means is that if you constantly add value, if you constantly show initiative, if you constantly keep in touch with people, they're going to do the same thing. And one perfect example is all of the business people in your community, in your network. If you're constantly giving referrals to them, if you're constantly giving business, giving value to them, what do you think that they're going to do in the reverse to you? It's just natural human nature and emotional intelligence and understanding that. And a great resource on that is The Go-Giver by Bob Burg and John David Mann. Now, examples of where you're going to need to employ emotional intelligence in business is when you have a seller who's super anxious about what's going to happen next with their listing. Or perhaps you have a client that loses out on a deal during a bidding war situation. Or maybe a seller who had their property under contract and they were excited about purchasing the next property, and then that deal falls apart. Or maybe you have a buyer who really wants to move forward with something, but they're a little bit hesitant, and you give them a very gentle nudge in the right direction to help them make the best decision possible for their situation. You might have issues come up in a home inspection, which were a surprise from the buyer's or seller's perspective. And your ability to implement your emotional intelligence and your experience is what's going to help set you apart from the next person. As we've mentioned, it's your personality, it's your individualism, it's your authenticity, and blending it with experience and perspective that's going to help you create a lasting impression and a good customer experience long term. You need to get on the same page with people, even if you're in the middle of a negotiation with a customer or with another agent, and things might be going well, things might not be going well. But when they are or when they aren't, you need to know where you stand. And a really great book on this is it's called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And they talk about in that book, it's not what you think, actually. It's a book about, let me just read the table of contents. Strategic assessments, doing battle, planning a siege, formation, force, emptiness and fullness, armed struggle, adaptations, maneuvering armies, terrain, 9 grounds, fire attack, on the use of spies. Now, this speaks to human nature, but it also says things in the book that are very wise, like knowing when to step down, like knowing what your leverage points are, like knowing when you should be avoiding Like, for example, finding scenarios where you don't need to fight, where you can outthink the scenario, where you can somehow get the upper hand. And when you're negotiating, people hire us because of our ability to represent their best interests. And whether or not you like the analogy of having it related to war, it's human nature. It's human nature. It's human behavior. And this particular book goes deep in some perspectives on how you can add strategies to becoming a strong negotiator. So I hope you found value today. I hope you can add to your emotional intelligence. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Feel free to book a link into my calendar if you want to have a quick, short chat. And I look forward to seeing you on this video next. Have a fantastic day.